Wherever you are, welcome to another of my takes on China. I'm going to talk about the drug war today, but sorry about the lighting and the microphone sound. I'm in a hotel and forgot to bring a microphone with me. I'll fix this tomorrow. But no one wakes up one day and says to him or herself that today's the day I'll become a drug addict. Society pushes people. In some cases, high disposable wealth creates a sense of either excitement or boredom from the stimulus of recreational drugs. And it's a form of escape as well. In others, it's peer pressure. We see other people doing it, they encourage us to try, and off we go down a slippery slope. In some cases, it's sheer desperation. If you've lived all your life in a society where homelessness is constantly a month away, where there are anxieties about your next paycheck or your next meal, or if it's even worse and you're currently sleeping in a cold doorway or under a windy bridge, your only option then might be taking something to escape that desperation. That's a way out. Now, if that's true, then it's society that needs to change, not laws. And definitely, there doesn't need to be people pointing fingers of blame where blame doesn't lay. China is accused of supplying the means to facilitate these escapes, but rightfully denies doing so. It's now gone one step further and it's issued a white paper on how it is controlling fentanyl, the cheapest and potentially the most dangerous recreational drug, if those are the correct words. However, China doesn't have a drug problem itself. There are very few drug addicts. There are no freely available drugs on the streets. That's not to say there aren't drugs in China. Of course there are, but they're just very hard to find. And here's a really interesting statistic that Americans will never see in their media. Of all the drugs caught in China, 92% of them were created outside of China's borders, with 99% of them coming from Thailand, Myanmar, and Laos, the area known as the Golden Triangle. The other 1% that was intercepted was all marijuana coming through the postal system. Listen to that carefully, because it says of all the drugs that police intercepted in China, only 8% were actually made in China. Now, many Americans would argue that's because they're all exported, but they'd be wrong, very wrong. According to the white paper, since 2017, only 3 criminal cases of trafficking fentanyl-related medications have been concluded in China, and there's been no cases of outbound smuggling or trafficking of fentanyl-related medications detected. So again, critics will say China isn't trying hard enough, and once again, they'd be dead wrong. China has worked extensively with the Drug Enforcement Agency, even to the point of setting up 2 Drug Enforcement Agency offices in Guangdong and Shanghai. Unfortunately, those offices were closed as a result of the countermeasures that China imposed because of Nancy Pelosi's ill-fated, ill-advised, and quite frankly, stupidly provocative visit to Taiwan. But notwithstanding that, there's a lot more. Just as far as the USA is concerned, as a result of the minor thaw when Presidents Xi and Biden met in the USA, there was a reset. And since then, on January the 30th, 2024, the China-US Counter-Narcotics Working Group held its first meeting in Beijing to identify priorities for counter-narcotics cooperation. The 2 countries have since convened multiple high-level meetings to promote bilateral dialogue and cooperation in drug control and law enforcement. On July the 31st, 2024, an interdepartmental Chinese delegation visited the US to attend the first senior official meeting of the China-US Counter-Narcotics Working Group. And again, we didn't see anything about this in Western media. We weren't informed either that China's Ministry of Public Security maintains daily hotline communication and holds regular exchange meetings with the U.S. Department of Justice's Drug Enforcement Administration. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security's Homeland Security investigations as well, and other drug control agencies. How much more information is Western media keeping from us? Furthermore, China has signed 50 intergovernmental and interdepartmental documents on drug control cooperation with more than 30 different countries and unions of countries. It's established annual meeting mechanisms with 13 countries and it's joined multilateral drug control cooperation mechanisms within the Greater Mekong subregion. It's also done so with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and BRICS. So when there are that many intergovernmental associations going on, it's very hard to tell lies about what they're doing. What is easy, though, is for Western media and willfully ignorant politicians to deflect blame and make unsubstantiated allegations. And we can now see how badly Western media, and of course those ill-informed politicians, are manipulating their consumers and constituents into believing China's the bad guy here. They're not. China has some drug issues. According to Statista, they make up 0.8% of the population. Now that's a problem for any country, but particularly one with a large population, because it means the number is high. It's a little over 1 million people. But when the CPC took control of the country, the number of drug addicts was over 70 million, and they fixed that problem with societal change and either by rehabilitation for volunteers or hard labor for people who didn't seek voluntary rehabilitation. This way, the number of drug-addicted Chinese people dropped from 70 million to virtually zero between 1949 and 1952. One country accounts for over 70% of all deaths from fentanyl, and yet it points at another country many miles away where there's no problem. Since the 1950s, China has had a zero tolerance for all drugs. And while there are people who are critical of this, especially those who consider marijuana to be a harmless recreational drug, they should take note of the historical reasons of the Opium War. We don't have to agree with it, but we ought to understand the history behind it. Internally, China has established a digital tracking system for fentanyl-related medications. The comprehensive use of new technologies and methods, such as radio frequency identification tags, the Internet of Things, the artificial intelligence AI, and there's also a whole process dynamic monitoring and closed-loop management of the manufacturing, sale, transport, use, import, and export of fentanyl-related medications, which prevents them from becoming lost. So if anyone in China is producing, they're doing it illicitly, and they're doing so in places they haven't yet been found. But China is even doing stuff to try and prevent this. A wastewater testing method has been developed for detecting traces of 6 fentanyl-related substances and 65 other drugs, as well as their metabolites, achieving a detection limit of 1 part per trillion parts of water, or 1 nanogram per liter. And domestic wastewater monitoring networks covering nearly 5,000 wastewater treatment plants in 365 cities are operating. There's also a biometric network covering high-risk groups. Since 2020, over 60,000 domestic wastewater samples, 150,000 hair samples have been tested and analyzed through these networks. There's also increased coordination across departments, including cyberspace, public security, and industry and information technology. In terms of transportation, just in China alone and logistics, there's additional security screening through machines with targeted measures for strengthening the detection and seizure of drugs. Customs authorities have also reinforced risk assessment and port supervision, and they have devoted targeted efforts to prevent the smuggling of fentanyl-related substances through any intensified inspections of high-risk cargo and all articles that leave China. America knows this. And remember, with all these measures in place since 2017, only 3 fentanyl-related convictions have taken place. So obviously, this is not a Chinese problem. It's highly unlikely that US claims of products being used to kill Americans are being made in or shipped from China. But anyone producing these illegal substances will get caught. And when they are caught, China has a zero-tolerance attitude towards drugs, including fentanyl-related substances. It's likely that anyone in China producing fentanyl or any related products will face the death penalty. Once again, it's been up to China to tell the truth about what's happening in the world. And not for the first time either. It's China helping to fix the USA's problems. As the white paper suggests, and I'm quoting from its conclusion here, we should dig into the deep-rooted causes of the abuse of synthetic drugs represented by fentanyl and promote the resolution of fundamental issues. When China says we, it means you, as in USA. Thanks once again for watching my take on China, and please don't forget to like, share, and check the subscribe button. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.